The most ferocious Scottish beast is also its tiniest. The Highland biting midge is world famous for ruining many Scottish summer outings, which begs the question, how did our Highland ancestors deal with them, especially as they spent most of their lives living, working and travelling in the outdoors? Well, join me in this video as I see what we can find out from history. I also do a bit of myth busting. To be honest, this was a terrible idea. I don't know why I'm doing this. And then I'll share 4 methods that I believe the Highlanders would have used to keep these ferocious biting beasties at bay. So, stay tuned. So speaking of history, what does the historical records tell us about midges and how people dealt with them? Well, unfortunately, it tells us pretty much nothing, which is really strange. So most of my videos, most of my series, I'm looking at the 17th century Highlands and before that. And literally, I couldn't find a single reference to the Midge. And even the folks, you know, the other Highland nerds on my Patreon page, discussing with them, we also could not find anything earlier than the mid-1800s. And literally all that I could find from the mid-1800s was that Queen Victoria going to Balmoral Estate, all it says is that she permitted smoking to deter the midges. We also hear remedies using bog myrtle. Now that leads some people to believe that midges were less common in the past, but I don't think so. I think midges and other biting insects have always been part of the landscape. They might have fluctuated in population with changes of climate and things like that, but I think midges have always been here. So my only guess is that people just didn't want to write about them. They were just not noteworthy about. Maybe they were just so normal, people just didn't even notice them. Or I do have some other theories about the certain living conditions people were in that actually might have made them less noticeable for the average person, which I'll discuss at the end of the video. Let's just first look at the biology of the Highland midge. When we can understand how it detects us and bites us, then we can know how to combat it. Now there's actually over 1,000 species of midge in the UK, about 5 of which can bite humans, but it's really only one species which is the culprit to most of the misery. That's the famous Highland midge, which its Latin name is Collocoides impuncticus, something like that. And it's only the females that bite. The worst time of year for them biting you is sort of late June into August. Now the Highland midge are absolutely tiny. It's amazing how much misery such a small thing can cause. They're only about 1 millimetre or 1.5 millimetres long. So despite the Highland midge being so ferocious, it does have a few weaknesses. First of all, it can't fly in wind stronger than 5 miles per hour. And secondly, because it's so small, it will easily get damaged by direct UV light. So you're rarely going to find it in the height of a sunny day. So essentially, the midge's favourite sort of weather is usually dawn and dusk, cloudy, drizzly and still. Next to no wind or just very little wind. That's what the midges like. And the midges can detect us and other animals really in 4 different ways. First of all, CO2 detection. It can detect the CO2 that we breathe out, and that's their main long-range detection. They can detect our CO2 from up to 200 metres away. Secondly is body odour. They can detect lactic acid, ammonia and octanol. Now this is where a genetic component comes in, and you might have noticed that some people are more of a midge magnet than others. There's a genetic reason for that. Some people are more smelly to the midge than others. And this is where there is some folkloric thing of if you eat, I don't know, lots of garlic or eat a certain of something, it might be able to change your scent. And potentially there is some truth to that. Thirdly, heat and moisture. When they get close enough to you, within a few meters, then they do have a sort of infrared detection and they're looking for warm, moist areas. You'll notice that they tend to want to bite you in your hairline, your armpits, anywhere sweaty, warm and moist. That's where they prefer to bite. And finally, visual cues. Now they don't have very good eyesight, but they prefer dark colours. So I've noticed before I've worn trousers that were both black and light grey, and I've noticed more midges landing on the area that was black. So the 2 most common modern methods for repelling the midge is of course insect repellents, which play the role in usually hiding our scent. The second most common method, of course, is some sort of bug net, which is actually creating a physical barrier. From my experience with midges, when they're in low density, there's quite a few different repellents that work, and smidge is great. However, when they're swarming, there's almost no repellents that actually work, and really the only thing that works is creating a physical barrier, other than some of these more historical methods which I'll share. So for this video, I'm just going to focus on the two small clues that we have, which is the use of smoke and the use of bog myrtle. So let's first look at bog myrtle. So this is a plant which I've mentioned before in a past video. Its Latin is Myrica galli. Its Gaelic is roch. It's a fun one to say, roch. And it's a beautiful plant. It's a very common plant. You find it in the Highlands. It's got a beautiful smell, aromatic, sagey smell. So to find out more about the uses of bog myrtle, let's consult one of my favourite books on Highland folk medicine, Healing Threads, written by Mary Beath. So this is what Mary has to say about bog myrtle. Credited with the power of keeping away mischievous fairies, it was once used as a substitute for hops in flavouring beer. It was also said to have some effect in keeping summer insects at bay. It was probably more effective at a domestic strewing herb on floors, helping to deter household pests, bugs and fleas. Now in the past, I've used bog myrtle quite a lot. It's quite nice as a soap for washing yourself. I have experimented using it as an insect repellent, and when the midges are in low density, when there's just the odd one biting you, I feel like it does work a little bit. But until recently, I had never actually tried it when they were swarming. So the other day, it was perfect midgie weather. They were out in force. So for the sake of historical science, here's a shot of me testing out bog myrtle when the midges are swarming. So I haven't put any midge repellent on me all day. Completely bare of any insect repellent chemicals. The midges have definitely found me. Bloody hell. I'm going to put bog myrtle just on my left arm. See what happens. That was a fairly generous portion. Put a bit more on. Oh, they all go under the armpits. Oh, as soon as you think that you can just meditate over it, they find a new spot. Wow. Yes, come on. Let's get all the green bits off. Oh, bloody hell. They're getting my head so badly right now. Mind over, Midge! Oh, Jesus, I should have been wearing a head net. Oh, yeah, I can't do that. Mind over Midge, Tom. Mind over Midge. Oh, they find you. Interesting. I don't really notice a difference. To be honest, this was a terrible idea. I don't know why I'm doing this. I had to go back and get a head net. It was too much. You couldn't really stay long enough to see if it was actually making a difference on my arm, because they were just crawling to my eyes and my ears. Right, let's do this again. Put a fresh amount of bog myrtle over my left arm. This is too much. So as you can see from that little myth-busting experiment using bog myrtle in a midge swarm, it doesn't work. I was trying to put just the bog myrtle on one arm and not the other and see if there was any difference, and to be honest, I couldn't see any difference at all. Now, I know people will say in the comments, oh, you can also use citronella, you can use this, you can use that. I think all of those do have a shred of truth, but they still just don't work when they're swarming. So, bog myrtle, when the midges are really bad, I'm gonna bust that myth, unfortunately. So the second only reference in history is smoking, and really all we have is this very small reference of Queen Victoria visiting Balmoral mid-1800s, allowing people around her to smoke to keep away the midges. I heard little mentions of, you know, people using campfires and use the smoke away and stuff, but there's not a very nice, tidy, exact reference to draw upon. Now, from my experience, smoke is really effective. Let's just remember, people were around fires all the time. In fact, there's loads of references about Highlanders' living conditions, that their houses were so smoky, visitors coming in, visiting and writing about experiences could barely deal with how much smoke was in these houses. Often they didn't have chimneys and they were just left for the smoke to peter out the thatch. So I think people would have just been completely impregnated with smoke. Also, when they're out and about, you're often cooking around fires. I think smoke was probably just the most common way to keep the midges at bay. Now, there's some situations where you can't have a campfire. Maybe you're doing stuff, and I will share some wee tricks that I found out in my historical living experiments. Which brings me onto that. So from my years experimenting with Highlander historical living skills, I believe the Highlanders would have used a mixture of 4 different methods to keep these midges at bay. Okay, so method 1, scheduling your day around the midge. Now, for the average Highlander living in the 17th century, most of their day would have been around agricultural practices, tending and harvesting crops, tending and milking and looking after the cattle. So I'm sure people would have scheduled their tasks whenever they could, you know, to avoid the peak midgie time. Now, of course, sometimes I'm sure people just had to suck it up and deal with them and do the tasks being bitten anyway. But I also believe people would have scheduled certain outdoor tasks during the midgie season when it was sunny and breezy to avoid the midges. And you'll notice the deer do this as well. You'll notice red deer will travel to higher ground where it's breezier to avoid the midges during the peak midgie time, and will only come back down when the midges aren't so bad. So I see no reason why our ancestors wouldn't have done the same thing. Method 2, choose your camp spot wisely. Now, I've talked about this in a previous video where I talked about how Highlanders survived in the barren bog. And essentially, the more you spend time in this environment, you just get a feeling about what area is going to be midgier than others. Again, for me, in the summer month, it's about finding that spot that's got the perfect amount of wind. So I generally, in the summer, will camp further up in higher altitude. And I'll try and find that spot where it's not so windy that I'm going to get cold, but it's just windy enough. It's just above that 5 mile an hour windy conditions to keep the midges at bay. You can actually get quite good at picking a decent camp spot where the midges aren't going to get you. Method 3, cover up. So when it comes to clothing, we know that midges are more attracted to dark coloured clothing. So the ideal sort of clothing that we want to be wearing is light covered and something that is actually going to cover our skin. And these historical shirts, this historical linen shirt, when it's not filled with holes like this one are actually fantastic for the summer months. Right, you can roll down and completely cover your arms. They're nice and baggy, so you don't overheat. They're brightly coloured and they're great for stopping the midges getting to you. Now, when I'm walking with the great kilt, a lot of the time I am going bare-legged, but for the sake of midges and ticks, I also do generally carry some linen or wool breeches to put on me and cover up my legs when it gets to the midgie time of the day. Now, when it comes to sleeping, again, the great kilt or the plaid is fantastic. It's long enough that generally I can fling it over my head and completely cover my head when I'm sleeping. The wool is nice and breathable, so it doesn't create condensation like a modern bivy bag. Now, sometimes it is too hot, if it's really kind of muggy. It's not that nice to have wool over your face. If it's that sort of situation, then I can also just cover my face using the linen scarf that I carry with me all the time anyway. And this way, it's nice and cooling, and it still completely covers my face when I'm sleeping and protects me from the midge. Final method, make a smoke shield. Now, you might have noticed that most of this video I've been filming at the edge of my camp. The reason why? Because the midges are out, and I have the remnants of this morning's campfire still smouldering away in the hearth there, which is creating enough smoke that's just seeping out the edge of the camp to keep the midges at bay. Honestly, smoke is probably the most effective way at keeping them at bay. Now, obviously, safety perspective, in some situations, it is just not safe to light fire, folks. So please be careful when using fire and creating smoke. However, I'm going to show you my favorite method of creating some smoke, which I believe is safe if you do it in the right way. And it's fantastic you know, if you're just kind of pottering around your camp. It's great maybe if you're gardening or, you know, pottering around your farm or croft. I call it the smoking pot. So for this method, you're going to need three things. The first thing, you need some sort of fireproof pot. My favorite things are these cast iron cauldrons that come with these legs. It means you can put it on the ground without scalding the ground. Also, the lid means you can put out and smother your fire whenever you want. Secondly, you need some sort of ember. Now, the easiest thing, if you're near, you know, a base camp and a campfire, is just to grab some embers from your fire. So I've just got some smouldering birch logs that I'm going to use. Other things that can help give you an ember, something that's going to smoulder for a long time, is dried punk wood. So punk wood is just wood that's rotten and it's gone kind of spongy. So when that dries out, that actually smoulders a long time and it actually creates a really good insect repelling smoke. You could also use dried horsehoof fungus, which has been used since the Stone Age to carry an ember. It just smoulders and creates a little ember, holds it for a long time. The final thing, which is nice to have, is some sort of strewing herbs to put on top of your embers and create smoke. You could just grab grass or a bit of moss, but if you use more scented plants, it actually makes your smoke smell quite nice. So I like to use either juniper, sprigs of fresh juniper, or sprigs of fresh bog myrtle. So all I'm gonna do is get my pot. I'll grab some embers from my fire, put them in here. Now you don't really want flames per se, you just want smouldering embers. Then I can get my sprigs of whatever plant you like the smell of. I'll just put it on top. Do a bit of bog myrtle, wee bit of juniper. You need to be careful of these conifer plants. They've got oils and they might spark and flame. So just use the juniper or conifers in a small amount. And then the great thing about these cauldrons is you can just pick it up and take it wherever you need the smoke. So this smoking pot method is my favorite thing to use if I just need to travel a short distance from camp. Say if I need to process firewood or, I don't know, collect water or forage something, I can just carry this with me, put it down upwind, obviously don't put it on anything too flammable, and then I can just do whatever I need to do and just make sure that that little smoke shield is always upwind for me and it's hiding my scent from the midges. Also, depending on what sort of plants you're smouldering, you can also give a very lovely incense to whatever activity you're doing. So there's the magic smoking pot. So there you go, folks. Those are 4 methods that I believe the Highlanders would have used to keep the pesky biting midges at bay. Let me know in the comments if you've heard or have tried out any other methods that work. Thanks so much for watching, folks. If you want to continue your learning, then check out my online school, Resilient Roots, where we're doing monthly live calls and annual gatherings here in the woods. If you appreciate my work and want to support it, come check out the Patreon page. We have discussions about history and things like that, and it's genuinely helpful sharing references and helping each other learn. There I also have a reading list from all my research, and the support there keeps the channel going and keeps it free from sponsorship interruptions. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and happy camping.